So here are 4 different strategies that you can use to create and generate more peacefulness in your life, more peace in your life. And notice I said generate. And what I mean by that is to create more of it so that it happens to be more and more in your life. It happens to you more and more in your life. And as usual, you want to take notes on this. You want to take notes not just because I want you to write some things down, but I'm going to give you something that you can do so that you can use this to produce a result. And so I'm going to start off with this. I'm going to tell you exactly what peacefulness is in my book. And if this is something you can use, then that's great. And if it's something that rings true to you, then you can use it as well, or you can add it to what you already might call peacefulness. And like I said, then I'm going to give you something to do. I'm going to tell you first off what it is, why it is, and then how to utilize what I teach you to have more peacefulness in your life. So take some notes. And so first off, let's start off. What is peacefulness? Now, it's an individual thing. It can be whatever you think it is or whatever you decide it is. But I look at it as this. Peacefulness is simply the emotion or the feeling that we get when our hearts and our minds are absent of stress and worry and all of the trappings and all the things that are going around. That time, that piece of our lives, that moment in our lives, a feeling when we get to go, ah. I remember that, when we get to go, however long that period lasts, that's your peacefulness. Now, again, you can add what you want to it. You can say, okay, well, that means this for me, that means this or that, or you don't know. Because a lot of people don't know what peacefulness means for them. But I'm here to tell you that peacefulness carries with it, that time where you get to go, like that. It carries a bunch of great things with it. You become more productive. And one of the greatest parts about it is it helps you heal, because your body functions better. When you're at peace, however long that moment is, your body is releasing chemicals. It is releasing endorphins and dopamines and oxytocin and all those things. And our cells are going, hey, this is great, so we can operate better. There's less cortisol going through our system, and if there's less cortisol, then our nervous system is functioning much, much better. We're sharper, we're happier, but here's the greatest part. Our immune system works better as well. Studies show that happier people, that more peaceful people are healthier people as well. Studies show that when people go into the place of peacefulness, they actually heal from some dreaded diseases, some awful diseases that are going on. And so obviously our goal is to spend more time there. Not everybody can spend all the time there, and I don't suggest that that's what you go after, but you want to make it your default. Remember, we always use something called neuroencoding. And encoding means that we're going to program ourselves to automatically default that way. And let's start here. So that's what it is. But let's start here. All of us have heard about meditating and going to that place and everything. And all of that stuff is great, and I encourage it. And the challenge with most of us, self included, is meditation does not always produce that feeling that we want as quickly as we want. There's different methodologies that you can use to get there quicker. But what if you had a way that you could not just get there quicker, but it happens automatically with you? And so I'm going to give you a couple things to do. And as you do these things, remember, we're programming ourselves. We're encoding ourselves so that it happens to us automatically. And so I'm going to give you a couple of statistics, if you will, or examples. First off, the way to get peaceful is to be quiet and be alone and to take some time off, if you will. Because as soon as you do, even the thought of it starts that chain reaction that I talked about earlier. And so there are a couple of studies that were done. One, I think it was Yale. No, it was Harvard that they did this several years ago. And you may have heard me talk about this, where they took a group of people. And these were, I believe they were longshoremen, which are people that unload the cargo off of ships at the docks. And they took like 50, maybe 60 men and women, and they said, okay, here's what you're going to have a regular work day. And on your regular work day, what you're going to do is you're going to come in, you're going to start at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're going to unload these ships. And then at noon, you're going to take a lunch hour. And then at 1 o'clock, you're going to come back, and you're going to work all the way till 5 o'clock. Okay? And at 5 o'clock, you're going to get off. And so they had them do this for X amount of time. Let's just say it was a week, 2 weeks, or whatever. And they measured how much work they got done. And at the end of the time, they said, okay, well, here's how much work we got done. And then they took another group of people. They were doing the same kind of work, and they said, okay, well, here's what your regimen is going to be. You're going to start at 8 o'clock in the morning. You're going to work 45 minutes. And at the end of 45 minutes, you're going to take a 10-minute break. And then you're going to come back and you're going to work another 45 minutes, 10-minute break, 45 minutes. And at lunchtime, you're going to go take your hour for lunch. You're going to come back and you're going to work 45 minutes, 10 minutes, 45 minutes, 10 minutes off. And then you work till 5 o'clock and it's off. And they did them for the same period of time. Maybe it was a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And at the end of the time, they measured how much the people got done that took the 10-minute breaks every 45 minutes. And then they compared those scores. They compared the scores to the ones that worked straight through till noon, took a lunch, and then straight through till time off. And the ones that took the 10-minute breaks, they did 25 to 30% more work than the ones that had worked straight through. And then you thought, okay, well, wait a minute, it's a different group of people, so blah, blah, blah. But then they switched it around. They took the ones that had previously done the one all day till noon, and they gave them the 10-minute breaks. And then they took the ones that were previously doing the 10-minute breaks, and they gave them working all day long. And it was identical across the board. The ones that were taking the 10-minute breaks that had previously been working all day long, they got 20 to 30% more done. And the ones that were doing the 1 hour, doing all day long until lunch and then coming off, 25 to 30% less. And this has been done over and over in a bunch of other things. But the question is, you got to ask yourself, well, what were those people doing during those 10 minutes? Because it's obvious, we think to ourselves, okay, we took 10 minutes off and they took a break and they rested and that kind of thing. That's obvious. But what they were doing is they had them sitting and being peaceful. It wasn't necessarily being meditating, but they had them doing some of what I'm going to have you do here as well. Sitting and being peaceful and letting the stress go out. And what happens is their bodies recharge, their minds recharged. And sometimes they had them visualizing things as well. Because peacefulness is not a destination. Peacefulness is the journey getting there. And so I'm going to give you a couple things to do, and I want you to write this down. Now, here's the steps that you do. Step number 1 is I want you to describe what peacefulness is for you. And how you do that is you just go, okay, let me say peacefulness is when I just let it go and I just breathe deeply and I just don't have a care in the world and everything is okay. I'm not worried about anything and I'm happy. Whatever you write down, remember, what you write is what you invite. If you haven't heard me say that again or before, hear it again for the 1,000th time for the first time. What you write is what you invite in your life. Because as soon as you do this, your brain has to answer the question, okay, what is peacefulness? And then step number 2 is remember times that you were peaceful in the past. And you can remember when you went on a vacation somewhere. Or you can remember when, you finished a job or you finished something and you went, ah. Just go through it, because throughout your life, it doesn't have to be any chronological order, but as you're writing this down, remember, your brain is remembering and reattaching and creating new neural associations. Because I guarantee you, in your life, you've had peacefulness, but most people don't know what that is. But if you can remember what it is, and if you can describe what it is, then guess what? It's human nature that we can revisit it again. So now that you have those two things, you've described what it is. And the next is to remember the different times, and you've written it down. Remember through this process. Now we're going to do this again. You know how I roll, 10 for 10 days. I'll give you the schedule here in a moment, okay? And the next is something that I call future pace. Future pace. And what that means is I want you to write down, remember this is a writing exercise first. I want you to write down what it's going to look like in the future. A year from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now. Describe, write it down, your ideal day. When you wake up in the morning, I wake up this morning and I haven't got a care in the world and I'm so excited and I'm so peaceful. And allow yourself to do this. Next, schedule to practice it. Step number 4, you always have to schedule, because if you don't schedule, it's just going to be a good idea. You may be listening to me right now and going, hey, Joseph, that sounds spectacular. I'm going to do it. Well, you know how that works out. Most of us don't do what we say we're going to do. But if you schedule it, you put it in your calendar, and you tell Siri, if you use Siri, to remind you to do this, then guess what? When it goes on, 2 things happen. Number 1, you're going to go and do it because you've been reminded, because most of the time, most of us forget to do things. But when you're reminded to do it, then guess what? You'll start to get excited and you'll go do it. But that phone and that reminder will be a trigger that'll cause you to get excited. And as soon as you get excited, remember, as soon as those eyebrows go up, dopamine gets released. Dopamine gets released, so does endorphins and oxytocin. It makes you feel good. And that in itself is another peacefulness. So schedule it. Schedule it and practice it. Step number 4. Now, scheduling it, practicing means this. All you got to do is just get out your list and read it. How simple is that? Read out loud, describe it. Okay, peacefulness for me means, my feet being up and my heart beating at, X amount of beats per minute and a smile on my face and not a care in the world, and I'm excited and I let everything go, and you're doing it. You're actually doing it in that moment, because as we think, so we are. As we think, so we feel. Because remember what I said in the very beginning, peacefulness is just a feeling. And then so once you feel it, then what happens is you move to the next step. You remember the things that I wrote down. You don't have to have it in front of you. Wrote down, okay, I was peaceful when I did this. I went on a vacation to Hawaii. I was peaceful when I was, at the end of a long day. I was peaceful, whatever. It's your history. It's your life. Remember it, because as you remember it, as we remember, so we feel. As we feel, so we do. As we do, so we have. And then next, just read it down. Okay, read out loud. Okay, in the future, a year from now, I see myself, resting on a beach. I see myself, excited. I see myself healthy and all of those things. Speak it, because remember, as you speak it, it becomes part of you as well. That's how you schedule it. And those 5 things, no, I'm sorry, those 4 things. The 5th one is, you know me, you know how I roll, is you always, always, always must praise yourself. Pat yourself on the back, shake your ass, do whatever it takes to go, wait a minute, I just did this. For all the reasons that I've said 1,000 times, your nervous system is going to go, oh, that feels good. What just happened before I felt good? Let's do it again. And that way you start to automatically show up and do those things. And this is a way to, again, program yourself, to encode yourself so that you automatically default to those states, to more peacefulness. Now, if you do, not if you do these things, as you do these things, then what happens is you become a more peaceful person, because this is what I call global effect. It doesn't mean that you're just going to be peaceful when you go and do it. It means that you start to, when stuff shows up, and it does, that distracts us or causes us to doubt or whatever, then we automatically start to default that way. We don't take things so seriously. We get to that optimism even quicker. Very, very simple. A couple other things that you can do, as I said before, schedule the time to be peaceful. I have machines in my house that vibrate and wiggle my feet and things like that. Whatever it is that you can use to allow yourself to relax. Schedule some time to relax, even if it's just like 5-10 minutes a day. In my house here, you'll probably see in the other videos, I love music. I play bass, guitar, and music and things like that. And that's my peacefulness. And when I do all those things that I told you to do, I think about it. Well, I'm peaceful when I'm playing bass. I'm peaceful when I'm playing piano. I'm peaceful, when I'm doing this. And I just think about those things. This is your domain. Set it up. And even if you got to go to your car to do it, schedule the time to do it. Next thing, a little helpful tip, is to find communities of people that are peaceful. If you go to church, maybe that's your group. Maybe not, but whatever. You find a group of people that practice peacefulness. As you seek, so shall ye find, and so shall it find you. Very, very simple. This is a way to create and generate more peaceful. Remember I said earlier, generating means it's going to be perpetual. It's going to happen again. So lastly, let me tell you a real quick story. And so there was this woodcutter. And this woodcutter, this old man, he was in his 80s. And he was the star of the show. In his village, he could cut more wood faster and more wood at the end of the day than anybody else in the whole land. And everybody celebrated him. Everybody in the village knew him, and he was just the greatest guy of all times. And people would come into his village all the time and challenge him all the time, but he would always win. But one day, a young guy shows up. And this guy was in his early 20s, full of muscles. And he was just absolutely determined to beat the old woodcutter. And he showed up and with his axe, and he said, "Woodcutter, I challenge you to a duel at sundown or sunrise." I don't know, I'm making this up. And he says, and the woodcutter says, "Okay, young man, I'll go for it." And he says, "Okay." So the village got together and they put a big stack of wood over here and they put a big stack of wood over here. And they rang the bell in the morning and the woodcutters got to work, chopping wood. Bam, 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 chopping wood. And the young guy was just moving. He was like just busting moves, busting wood out. And all of a sudden he looks over at the old guy, and the old guy is like sure and slow, slow and steady, chopping wood. And the young guy goes, I got this. This guy's old. Look at how slow he is. I'm busting moves. I'm busting boards. I'm busting wood. And he keeps chopping and chopping and chopping. All of a sudden, at 50 minutes into it, the old guy stops and looks at his watch, or his pocket watch, or whatever it is, takes his axe, throws it over his shoulder, and wanders off. Matter of fact, he goes up the hill to this shed in the up on the hill. And the young guy goes, what the hell? Look at this guy. He's taking a break? Unbelievable. I'm going to keep on going. So he does. He keeps on going because he's young. He's full of energy, and he keeps on chopping, chopping, chopping. 15 minutes later, here comes the old guy down the hill, and he starts chopping again. Chopping, slow but sure, slow but sure. And this goes on all day long. The old guy works for 50 minutes and then takes 15 minutes off. Well, you know how the story ends. At the end of the day, they add up the wood, and the young guy looks at his pile and he goes, I got this. But the old guy's pile was 30% more, 25 to 30% more that he had chopped wood. And the young guy goes, I don't get it. This is impossible. I'm young, I'm strong. I worked faster, I never stopped, I kept on going, and you got this much more? And every 40, 50 minutes, you go up there and take a break. And the old guy goes, oh, I get it. I understand. So you think I was going up there to take a break? He said, no. Every 50 minutes, I go up to that shack and sharpen my axe. Huh? You get it? And so in this case, sharpening your axe is taking some time to find your own peacefulness. You always have the opportunity to sharpen your axe, and it's sometimes the most unlikely way of doing it. It might be counterintuitive. But I'm here to tell you, science says it, and that silly little story says it as well. Take the time to sharpen your axe. Use these 5 tools, use these things to help you go further, faster in your life. And remember, life is exactly what you dare to make it. And fortune favors the bold. And sometimes daring to do something is doing something simple and something that sounds counterintuitive. And when you do it, that's how you go further, faster in your life. I look forward to serving you, and I'll see you at the top.